Hello all newcomers and welcome back fellow Aeternians. Today I am here with Jet Black and we are going to be talking about artificial intelligence, specifically the, what's the name of the artificial intelligence?
MIT's alter ego.
MIT's alter ego, thank you so much.
No problem.
We're going to be talking about MIT's alter ego, AI intelligence, and specifically moving forward with what that would mean for micronations, what it's going to mean for macronations, and the future of the world. So let's get into that.
Do you mind if we start off by talking about what the alter ego is, to just let them really know what it is before we start?
No, that sounds good to me. I think especially with trying to get into it's an interesting shift from how things are right now, where you have text-to-speech and where you have artificial intelligences like Siri and Alexa that are starting to move toward that direction, but we don't quite yet have a full immersion. So I guess that's part of the appeal, is getting a more complete connection with the technology you're using.
Oh, most definitely. Our connection with technology now, I feel, is nowhere near where it will be in the future, especially based off of technology like this.
Yeah.
But to make this sound a little less esoteric and give you just more of a concrete idea of what we're discussing, this is essentially a direct quote. I'm going to read a paragraph straight from the MIT website. I feel like they did a good job putting it in layman's terms for you to understand what it is. The alter ego is a wearable, silent speech system for silent and seamless natural language communication with computing devices and other people. Alter ego seeks to augment human intelligence and make computing, the internet, and machine intelligence a natural extension of the user's own cognition by enabling a silent, discrete, and seamless conversation between person and machine. The wearable system reads electrical impulses from the surface of the skin and the lower face and neck that occur when a user is internally vocalizing words or phrases without actual speech, voice, or discernible movements. The system is a private, personal, and seamless alternative to computing platforms used today. Long story short, if you think saying something in your mind, so you vocalize a thought in your mind, essentially like what you do when you talk to yourself, the alter ego wearable device will recognize that and is able to interact with the internet or interact with an AI in order to do more or less what you wanted it to do.
No, absolutely. And it sounds really cool. The description of it is really interesting, and it sort of gives you this very futuristic mindset of sort of how things are going to be. And you would think it's this very seamless, very smooth looking technology. But it looks like your jawbone. It's a thing that I am not an artist, so please take this with a grain of salt. But it sort of looks like that.
And I think it has two little prong things under it.
Yeah, it sort of breaks down like that. And it's just very strange. So if this is approximately where your ear is, and this is a weird head, but this is the side of your head, then that's sort of how it is.
Yeah, I wanted to look at how it was in the shot. They definitely can see your whole drawing, which is good.
Oh, awesome.
And that's pretty accurate.
Thank you.
To be honest, yeah, it does look like that.
It's just sort of weird, especially you were talking about earlier. You have a beard, so with people who have specific things like that, or maybe people who just have sort of something that makes it uncomfortable to wear that, it would be difficult. I don't know if they'll come out with different designs that'll have different features and stuff. But while we continue talking, I'm gonna go ahead and trick out my guy who has the alter ego on.
Okay,
just
cool.
Because he needs to be styled.
Yeah, I'm down for the styling guy. So one thing that's really interesting about alter ego's ability to convert vocalized thought into text is we have so many AIs out now that can use text in order to create other forms of media, which essentially means with alter ego, you can create media with a thought, and I find that really interesting. For example, we have thought to text, and then you can do text to speech, which would essentially allow you to send a text message with a thought, and then have that text message, thought message, or whatever, be said by like a computer voice. So I could send Aiden a message that's like a text message with a thought, and then it'll just like vocalize that message to him through a computer voice. But with certain services, you can get text-to-speech voices to be your own voice. So I could send him a thought message, and when the computer read it, it would read it in my voice, and it's practically like telepathy at that point. But it goes deeper than that. I know that there are a lot of surface-level things being discussed about alter ego, like, oh, it's like using Alexa, but just with your head. But I feel like, while that's cool, it's not as cool as what it can potentially be used for.
No, absolutely. Before we get too deep into the logistics of like how it works, and before we get too deep into specifically talking about like added features of it, I'd just like to talk about like future design things. So I don't know what you guys think about this, and I'd really like to hear your comments and your feedback about it. But what if it were something, because people are getting more into like bioenhancements and things like that, and because people are getting, have been for a long time into like piercings and things that are sort of just body modifications, what if you had it become something like that? Like something that's removable, but is something that would actually just be like very subtly, like right there, or like right near your ear, or something like that, that would just sort of be there. The one thing I don't like about this is it looks like a Bluetooth headset, and that's sort of, I don't like the way Bluetooth headsets would look. But I feel like if it was something that looked cool and it was really discreet, people could just like take it in and out, and it wouldn't be weird for like a job or anything, and you wouldn't look like you have a jawbone outside your jawbone. So I don't know. What's that Pokemon that's like a little dog thing, but it has like a bone on its head, like a skull?
I've heard of like what you're talking about. I think it has bone in its name. Cubone.
Cubone, yeah, it looks like a Cubone. Like he's building his Cubone cosplay. Is the thing.
It's a work in progress.
Yes.
When it comes to its aesthetic appeal, I noticed that in the description of what the alter ego is, it talks about how it reads the electrical impulses from the surface of the skin in the lower face and neck. And I think the only reason why it curves all the way around the ear is just so that it can be like held in place while the other stuff is like stuck to your face.
Right.
So I feel like from here up, it's not doing anything. Like it's just to keep it there. So if you had a way for it to either just like you apply it to your face and it'll just kind of stick there, which I don't see how that would work with like beards and stuff like that. And also, if you just had a little bit of hair, like not even a full beard, if it's stuck to your face and you remove that, you with like a wax. Like I don't think that'd be cool either. There needs to be a way for it to attach to your face in like a non-invasive, non-stupid way.
Which is why I really like the idea of like a piercing, because people get like their ears pierced. They even get like little ones, and I'm not even sure how they do this because I've never seen it done before, and I've never asked somebody who has this piercing. But there are some piercings that just look like a dot on someone's face, and I don't know like where it comes out at, but like where the other part of it is. But I know they can be removed, and I'm pretty sure they can.
Are you talking about those little plastic moldings you can get inside of like your face and other parts of your body? So
maybe, but I've seen people with like, they look like little metal, and they're just like right there.
Metal?
They're like right there, yeah. I mean, I guess this would be like just in your lip, but like.
Do you mean like a little metal like divot or something?
Yeah. But I don't know like how it's interesting. But if you could do something like that, just like very subtle.
You have Vegeta, like, welcome to the stream.
Hey Vegeta. If you just had something that was like really tiny that would just look like a dot on your face.
The big thing that I like to think about is what you can apply it to when it comes to modern developing technology. So what could you make using the alter ego, using what's already available? what is the main concern or thought that you think of when it comes to the alter ego?
The main benefit I see is making things like learning a lot easier, just because I don't like the idea that right now, because we aren't fully immersed with our technology, we have essentially this need to continue sort of an education system where we want people's like knowledge that they have stored within their own brains to be worth more than the information that they have access to. So we don't like people to use the internet for class to learn things or to use things and to essentially have that as sort of what we would see now as a crutch. But I feel like with this technology and with other technologies moving forward very similarly, it would be more useful for people to just learn how to integrate better with their technology, because the technology itself will so far surpass human capability that it's not worth you storing those things in your mind, because you'll be able to recall them in an instant, and you'll just be able to focus better on how to improve that technology to get more answers out of it, instead of trying to find the answers yourself when there won't really be a time that you'll need them.
And that's definitely a solid point. There is a reason why people associate alter ego being able to take the things that you vocalize in your mind and use them with home assistants. But that's because these home assistants already give you so much.
Right.
You can ask Siri questions and Siri will search the internet and give you answers. But that requires you to like think of the question, and then if you're using your voice, you go, "Hey Siri," and you say the following, or you go like, "Okay Google," or whatever you have, and then it searches it for you and then it tells you. But with this device alone, because from what we've seen, it's not necessarily based off of like phone connectivity. They've yet to have like an alter ego thing that shows you have to like get a phone app or anything. It's its own device that can work with those devices.
Right.
So it seems like with an alter ego by itself, you can just think the question that you want, and maybe at the beginning of the question be like, "Hey Siri, da-na-na-na-na-na-na," and then get that response back through alter ego. Even though the device itself doesn't have a headphone, it uses like bone conductivity so that you hear the response and it's still private, no one else hears the answer. So you can just sit, and if you're not doing anything, just continually ask Siri questions in your mind and get responses back and just know it.
No, absolutely. And that makes things like, if you've ever been in class and had to do like a report or something like in front of the class, and all of a sudden like a word blanks on you and you just can't remember it. With an integrated AI software like this, it might be able to be listening to what you're saying and moving along with potentially even your own like speech or whatever you have. And then like as soon as you start blanking on that word, it like tells you the word in your ear without anyone else hearing it. So then you get to this point where you're able to do things better because of the fact that you have this technology available to you. And as well going into things like it talks about in the video, going over like grocery lists, going over potentially things in your own like business. You have all this information here in front of you, so you don't ever have to say, "Well, let me go look that up," or "Let me go pull this up." Whereas like even the most autodidactic genius person who can remember everything would still at some point have a fault where they say, "I actually don't know." But with this, it makes that a very rare thing.
Yeah. When it comes to giving a speech in front of the class, what you could do is if you have your speech like already written as a document, you could probably ask like an AI using alter ego, "Hey, can you like text to speech this for me and like read my speech to me?" And then when you go up, you like tell it to read it to you, and it tells you through the bone conductive thing like the words of your speech, and you just say it out loud along with as you hear it, and you're the only one who can hear it as you say it. And then if someone interrupts or asks a question, you can like say like pause in your mind and it'll like stop.
Yeah.
The only issue would be if you like aren't thinking to pause it and it runs a little bit farther and you're like, "Ooh," but that's also just like a user error thing at that point. You didn't just pause it on time.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
I really like it for whenever you watch those spy movies and they ask the person questions and there's like a person on a computer that's talking to him through a headset that's like answering the questions for him. Now that's just Google. Yeah. like someone mentions something and you're like, okay, Google, like through your alter ego, and it's just like telling you more information about it as you talk to them.
Well, that's one of the things that I don't like necessarily right now about AI technology that I feel like is just sort of something that's a little bit of a pet peeve, but is understandably necessary, is having to say things like, okay, Google, or okay, whatever. Because humans, a lot of the time, would sort of just know when you're talking to them, depending on how the conversation's going, unless there's something specific that you need to like get their attention for. But AI, you have to specifically give this like keyword, this thing that they pick up on. But with the video, it didn't even seem like you had to say okay anything. You would just think something, and it would just be like, oh, this is for me. This is what I need to figure out.
So the video he's referring to, because I don't think we've referred to the video yet.
Right.
There is a demo video of Alter Ego. Mm-hmm. So if a lot of this sounds like too good to be true and you really want to see it for yourself, if you Google MIT Alter Ego, you can watch this demo video where you can see someone actually using it in their day-to-day life.
No, absolutely. And I'll even put the link in my video to it, like down in the description.
Yeah, solid idea.
Yeah.
What I'll do for my description is I've been doing a lot of like brainstorming. So if your description looks like really thick and not organized, it's because I literally just copy and pasted the brainstorm like into the description, mm-hmm. and you can like use those ideas and look at them and see like how they compare to like your own thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I feel like another topic to talk about with this technology is how it affects things like your own personal thoughts. Off camera, Jet and I were talking about how that deals with things like mental health. And if you were thinking your own private thoughts and don't necessarily want it to be something that's immediately published, or something that's recorded in any way, or something that's even interacting with some sort of computer or some software. One thing that was beneficial that we were talking about is like someone who wants to vlog all the time and they want their private thoughts using this technology to be completely open and completely out there. Whereas someone might have the same like settings or same situation for like their job, but then forget about it or be ignorant of how to use the software. So it ends up coming out where something that they didn't want to be on the internet or something that they didn't want to be recorded is there, and that they can't help it at that point, that it's done damage.
Most definitely. One example we talked about was what if someone has like dissociative disorders that involve like multiple personalities that talk in their head, and they may not act on what those personalities say, and those personalities may not have any control over them, but they still vocalize in their mind. With a technology that responds to mental vocalizations, you could have a version of you, like a personality that's like a shopaholic. And when you go to Walmart regularly, it will just tell you to buy everything, but you know not to act on that, and you don't. But with Alter Ego, it could essentially just scream at Alexa all day, constantly telling it to buy things on Amazon, and it would be really hard for you to stop it.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And especially having something like that where you feel like there would be somebody else who, in the outside world, especially in today's world, would understand your situation and would be like a loved one or a friend who can help you through those sort of difficult situations, not for your life. But in the short term, because of this new technology, when they're, for whatever reason, away, if they have a job, if they are just doing something else for a moment, it could just take a quick second, because you're connected to the internet, to do a lot of damage to your own life without even realizing it, or without being completely aware of the effect that your thoughts are having just by doing so. And then even getting into like hacking and things like that. There are already softwares that you can put on people's computer that allow you to manipulate them or copy files without them realizing it. So how would that work with someone's brain as far as like if you're just constantly recording their thoughts and where they are and what they're seeing and things like that without them ever knowing that you're doing it? Like how would you know that you don't have a live audience listening to your thoughts without you wanting that?
And we've talked about that before. Recently in my network defense and cybersecurity course that I'm taking at my university, we were discussing specifically electromagnetic spine. Electromagnetic spine can detect the electrical signals that are being given off by your device or computer, and by doing so can detect the actual data that's stored on the device. The U.S. government has a standard called Tempest that's used to protect like government computers from electromagnetic spine, but that's not necessarily a commercial standard. That doesn't mean that even like my own laptop or my phone or your camera like are under Tempest standard, and I highly doubt that. So something like alter ego that can detect what you're like vocalizing in your mind, your very thoughts. If it's vulnerable to electromagnetic spine, then that would make it where someone could, just from being around you, be able to know what you're thinking and have like a text transcription of what you were thinking.
No, absolutely. And then also that sets like interesting legal precedents, because from a preventative standpoint, the law might say, well, if someone's like actively thinking about doing something like committing a murder or like hurting someone or like robbing a bank or doing something like that, it would be in the best interest of the many, of the populace, to be able to see when that's going on, knowing that maybe hours or days in advance you could actually stop them from doing a lot of damage to society. But at the same time, if someone never has the intention of actually going through with that, you would be invading their personal privacy and their freedom of speech to a huge degree, because of the fact that you're having to deal with this situation of, well, do I protect the individual's personal rights and wait until the moment that they decide to act on it and actually break the law? Or do I take the liberty of going and determining their thoughts for myself and recording them and keeping record of it to use against them in a legal setting?
Well, what's interesting about seizure of information when it comes to law enforcement, you normally require a warrant in order to like invade someone's privacy in such a way in order to like take information.
Right.
But when it comes to thoughts and freedom of speech, it's interesting to see in the future if thought is actually protected by the Constitution. You could argue that like freedom of speech should protect that, right? But not necessarily so. Freedom of speech has a lot to do with like freedom of expression, and expression is like you're sharing your thought like actively in like some kind of outer form. But your thought itself could possibly, depending on how like the Supreme Court views it, could not necessarily be considered a form of expression because you're just not. It's not you expressing anything. It's like just the bare thought.
And I definitely understand that viewpoint. The only reason that I feel like it should hold up the other way is because of the idea that your expression is a collection of how you want to be viewed. So saying self-expression or freedom of speech is you crafting an identity that says, this is how I want people to perceive me, these are things that adequately represent in the long term how I think and feel. But we have lots of other parts of our brains that do things and that act without necessarily filtering them, like we do when we actually speak to someone. Even someone who has a very, I guess, low-level filter or very unstrict standards of how they speak versus how they think, there's still a difference to some degree. So saying that you wouldn't want to invade somebody's freedom of speech, which is their chosen thoughts to be released, their filtered thoughts to be released, seems like even more of an infringement to say, I can take your completely unfiltered thoughts and choose which one of them are deemed what is actually you versus what is clutter that you were sifting through to design your own personality and to feel like what fits for you.
You definitely have like a solid point, and I do agree that they should, if like even if they say the Constitution doesn't directly protect it, there should be an amendment. Like there should be like something. Like the court could say in a case, the Constitution doesn't protect your thought, but that's not okay. Like yeah, like they could, that should definitely be the way it goes if they do deem that to be the case.
Absolutely. Well, because a thing like this, I'm sure I'm not alone in this. I'm sure this happens quite a bit. But have you ever seen something that, like, just from a safety point of view or from, like, a health point of view or whatever, you look at something that seems unsafe and you're like, I could, like, if I wanted to, I could do something negative. It's not something you'd ever do, but just, like, that's sort of a silly thing that's set up like that. There would be better ways to go about it. But having a thought like that might be considered like reasonable assumption that you're going to commit a crime or do something like that?
It all depends. I feel like it has a lot to do with context.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say, for whatever reason, you can get warrants on thoughts, to where someone can set up like an electromagnetic spine sting,
Right.
and they're like looking at what you're thinking actively through that against your alter ego.
Mm-hmm.
Then I feel like they shouldn't just be like, at 10 a.m. you thought this, and like, it shouldn't just take like an abridged quote. They should have to take like into consideration everything else you were thinking like at that time, and possibly even earlier. Like, you may only be thinking it because maybe someone said something similar to that to you earlier, or maybe like in the context of the situation when you were thinking like kill him now, it was like you were watching Friday the 13th and like they were like about to take down Jason, yeah.
And I definitely get a context then, but I've also had situations like in my own mind and in my own life where like I won't mean something a certain way, but like because of context, because of situation, I'll then later have the understanding of like, oh, that wasn't how I meant that. If looked at from a different perspective, this might have seemed weird, despite the fact that I wasn't intending it to be. Just the setup of how things proceeded and what I decided to do at each one of those steps, despite the fact that it didn't necessarily have to associate with how it may have looked, still is a thing. Like, sort of like being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I don't know. Because, like, if you think, like, oh, I could rob this place, and, like, you're, like, walking by, and you're like, oh, I could rob this place, and then you're like, oh, I need to deposit money into this bank. So then you walk into the bank, and then you walk up to this teller, and you see that they, like, have a large stack of money behind them, and you're like, oh, I could grab that stack of money. And then, like, the security place in the building has, like...
Electromagnetic spine, and they're, like, checking to see if people are, like, thinking about robbing the bank.
Right,
Kind of
and
thing.
then you, like, they say, oh, okay, like, I need your ID for that. And you go and, like, reach in your bag. And then they're like, oh, shit.
No, yeah.
And they, like, tackle you and tase you and throw you in jail. And then it's, like, under context, that looks really bad. But it was all just, like, the way I was thinking, knowing that my intention was not to do that, versus how it looked from the outside and how you selectively chose my thoughts.
Now, if security, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I keep opening my laptop and like closing it back is I'm trying to make sure that I'm not missing live chat for one, but also that the stream integrity is good because it can tell me from a distance. Ryan said the future was an inside job.
I agree. Time Lord did Future 11.
So for the bank example, it would be really interesting if banks in particular, it's like we don't need a warrant, or if like the law was set up in a way to where if you're doing electromagnetic spine like in a location, you had to tell people in a similar way to like when you walk in a store. I don't think they have to tell you anything for stores, but they'll have signs that'll say, we have security cameras.
I think that's more like a theft deterrent. And it might be a similar thing though. Like,
Yeah. So it's like we have electromagnetic spine, or they probably would just call it thought tapping. We like to like make little nicknames for things.
Yeah.
So for the bank, I feel like in that situation, I could totally see it where the security guard like has a system, like an AI, that's like looking at everybody's thoughts, and if it hears like suspicious keywords, and it'll like flag some people more than others, and it'll show you like a portrait of that person that the camera took like on the way in, kind of thing, as their thoughts keep hitting more of these flag words. But I feel like no one should act unless like an action seems to be correlating with a thought. So at the point where you're like, she's like, oh, I need to see your ID, and you like reach to get your ID, if you thought to yourself, and now I'll pull out the gun, like, you know, like if there's no like thought that's like preempting it, or like she's gonna get it now or some shit like that, then it shouldn't be enough.
Very true, but what if you're just an asshole? Like, what if you just think like that? And also, a thing that's very similar to that, like, that would make pranksters and memes, like, so much worse. Because you'd be like, I was just thinking like that. But you could be intentionally trying to trip up those alarms and stuff. Another thing that's really interesting about that would make, in both a positive and a negative sense, that would make things like, for example, our micronation stuff that we're doing, really great because with this technology, you would be able to know who around you is a part of something that you're a part of, and also able to communicate with them just through thought and be able to link up and say like, hey, I have this idea, and it would go out to everyone and they'd be like, oh, that's great, let's meet up and let's do this, and you'd be able to know people's schedules automatically, and you'd be able to know like what they release to you so that you can coordinate things with an extreme ease. However, that would make other things like people with negative intentions who are targeting a specific like racial group or like religious group or something like that for like terroristic purposes terrible, because they could have like hacking sort of devices that would be able to tap those thoughts and do things like that and be able to say, I know all these people that I don't like are going to be meeting up at this place.
Yeah.
And I know like how many of them are going to be bringing weapons, and I know how many of them are going to be protected. And I know all of these different details because of the fact that I just have this thing that can read everyone's mind.
Yeah, reading people's minds is very dangerous.
Yeah.
Potentially. And I do agree with that. And there is a lot to be discussed when it comes to like privacy and security risk when it comes to the alter ego. But the thing that captures my imagination is how it can be incorporated with like newly developed and existing artificial intelligence. Microsoft has an AI where if you give it a text description, it'll like draw an image or whatever you described.
Right.
There is an AI that can take images and turn them into 3D models, and there's another one that can take a still image and turn it into like a video. There are AI that can turn videos of like games into just like a full working game engine for you to develop your own games kind of thing. So when you put all of that together, you can get very interesting creative possibilities. You think of like the description of a picture, but you're not an artist, so you don't know how to draw. So you just think out the details that you'd want in the picture, and then the Microsoft AI draws it for you. And then you're like, man, this picture would be really cool. I'd love to like give this superhero picture that I thought of to my kid, but not as a picture, but as like a toy. So you put it through an AI that can turn images into 3D models, and you go to a 3D printer and you print it, and now you have like a toy for your kid. So your kid's like, toys, it's fucking 2025. I don't want a toy, I want a game. And you're like, oh, that's cool. So you take your image and you run your image through the thing that can make like videos out of like a still image. So now you have a little video, and then you run it through the Georgia Tech Institute AI that has the whole Georgia Institute. I shouldn't say Georgia Tech. The Georgia Institute AI that can turn a video into like a game engine for a video game, regardless of whether or not it was ever a video game. It just said, oh, that video, now it's a game. So now you have like a game for like your son or your nephew or your cousin or whatever to play that stars like a character that like they have the action figure of, and they have the poster of it like on their wall in their room, and all that stuff just came from like that one description that you like thought of.
Absolutely. And it'd be cool for parents to get to their kids, but it would also be a thing that kids could just do themselves and be like, oh, I really like this thing, so I made one, and I can show it to my friends now and stuff like that. And they'd be like, oh, I have the exact same one. So it's like, oh.
We think a lot alike.
Right. But another thing that would be really interesting is to see how that works. As far as like the general scope of this, I really would like to see almost more strict like business practices put in for it, as far as how people have to go about creating these things legally to sell them. I think, unlike computers, how you can buy a computer from a large company like Google or like Samsung and have it be the same computer that everybody else has that specific model of, and it be the same. I would really like it if a company could put out a model of it, but that within a certain area, like you have to divide them up to where they're built differently and that their software is different, so that like nobody could ever hack a whole bunch of them at once. So like within your community, like within like 12 square miles or like 80 square miles or whatever, like all of these are built a specific way. They have their own specific like software. They have their own specific coding stuff that's fundamentally different from like the next town over. It's different from the next town over. The reason for that being that if anybody ever tried to hack those things or cause problems with it, it wouldn't be really worth it to them because of the fact that they'd have to, like if they're trying to get a large network of people, they'd have to have so many different things in order to actually link them up, especially with people traveling. So they bought it in one town, but they come to this different town, so everybody's stuff becomes really different. Another thing, if somebody ends up getting into that software, it's not a problem where they have to say, okay, so we have this like worldwide issue that everybody's software is now compromised because hackers know how to get into it. Now, or like their hardware is compromised because somebody's built something that can just override everything. Now all they have to do is say, they got into this specific one, so we just have to recall the ones that are from these people and say, hey, we're sorry, that's our mess up. We'll take them, we've already manufactured a new one that fixes it, and we'll send it out to you. And then everybody else is still protected, because hackers have to go in and like figure out all their stuff. And then while they're trying to do that, the company can just say, so we figured out what the problem was as a whole, and in order to prevent it in other ones that haven't been hacked yet, we can now just start implementing like new pieces of technology and slowly phasing this out to phase a new model in.
There are a few issues with that, I would have to say. The main reason why you don't have a lot of like techno diversity with like a single product like that, where each area gets like a different thing, is because for them to be significantly different, it becomes like working from ground floor for like each one that you develop, and it just takes a lot. What they would want to do in that situation, let's say everybody's alter egos get hacked into, like literally the whole world. There should be like an announcement where like let's say MIT, which they're not a company, they wouldn't sell it. It would be, they'd have like a branch off, like a startup or something. Let's just call it the AE startup. The AE startup should put out like a press release that's like, hey, everybody's alter egos are hacked. Stop using alter egos until we figure out the situation. And then they would like go to the drawing board, everyone would work out like what was the problem and try and fix it. And then once they found a solution to it, they would either say, hey, we're doing a recall. We need to do like a mass firmware update if it's like we have to like change something with like the hardware, and you need to like send it back and we have to change the hardware. Or it would be like, oh, it's a software issue and it's like everybody's alter ego. We're gonna have like a new like update thing sent to you, patch it. Yeah. And some things auto patch, and if it auto patches, then that's just really good. It's like, oh, your thing's fucked, take it off, and then like there'll be like a news update or just a post on the internet, and it's just like, hey, the new patch is out.
And that works fine when it's wearable technology. But at the point where we become so, at the point where it becomes so beneficial to just have it integrated directly into your body for health reasons, for mental reasons, for everything, it doesn't become feasible for somebody to turn it off, because
no data.
You have to like physically remove it.
Okay, we're back. I don't know when it cut out for us.
Okay.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Okay. But so the whole difficulty with that is that it once it becomes something that's integrated into people's bodies, once they have this whole network of technologies that are in their body, you could like turn it off in some way. There may be an off button, but if someone knows how to get into the firmware of it, they could just remotely turn it back on and fuck your shit up and like kill you over it. And like kill millions of people over it. So the difficulty with that is I feel like you would just want to make it a legal thing to begin with, so that people know if you're going to get into this business, if you're going to be doing these things, you have to do it at such a diverse level that it does become impossible for there to be like a worldwide like genocide of people because someone decided to hack the wrong thing, or purposefully hack the wrong thing.
Well, I feel like the odds of it becoming like a bio thing, like where it's like, oh, it's just like put inside your body, I feel like that's almost never the right idea for this in particular, simply because you're essentially saying this is so good, right, that you just won't ever want to take it off. Or like if you do want to take it off, you have to like go through a little bit of shit.
But
you know what I mean?
For example, what if there was an integration to this that said like, hey, for people with mental health disorders and things like that, there's an AI assistant that can be with you that's like therapy for you constantly. That constantly is able to help you and constantly able to know like your track record for certain thoughts and things like that, and help you to cope and adjust with situations even when nobody else is there. Like if you have anxiety attacks or things like that, like something that's just helps day to day, second to second, improve your quality of life. And then for people all around the world, whether it's with physical health problems, whether it's with aging and things like that, if you have an integrated system in your body that says, hey, because we can watch you every second of every day, we can tell what every chemical in your body is doing constantly, so we can extend your lifespan from 100 years max to 200 years max, just by being able to constantly manipulate and alter very slightly chemical balances in your body, so that each of your organs lasts longer and is able to fight off cancers and do like things like that better. But it also can tell you years in advance when you need to have something actually removed, so that you could just have that operation. It would cause no problems to your body, and you could live for a very long time. Like that, I feel like at that point, it becomes so much more useful just to have it integrated than not to.
Well, the issue with that requires an alter ego that not only is like an implant into your body, but also has all these additional functions. Like the alter ego in itself now is more of a way for you to use your thoughts as input for other things to use as output, and it doesn't register all those additional things.
Right.
But you could also argue that unification isn't always like the best solution, because if you go really hard in that route, then it's like it's your alter ego combined with all these other things all in one device that's implanted into your body, and this one thing does everything. But the one thing does everything model, I feel like, hits a point where like you don't actually want that.
Well, like why?
Because of the fact that when you get to the point, like the one thing, like the actual one thing, people don't even use other things. You have the one thing in you. If that one thing is exploited, that one thing is fucked.
But that's why I feel like you could still have one thing, but make it so incredibly diverse that like each piece has to like update to a different software and like change itself as it moves through your body. Like chemical signals change as they move through your body. Like neural signals are different than muscular signals are different than things for like the way that your blood flows and stuff like that, and the way that your heart has like it's correction sort of things. So with all of that, it seems like it would be a good idea, especially if you can have these processors just run that fast, to be able to constantly switch over and to have all these things be fundamentally different, yet hooked up to the same system. Because otherwise you can't get the same benefit out of it.
Well, I feel like the issue is that there is no such thing as like an unhackable thing. Even if you make something incredibly complex and you have like so many diverse versions of it, I don't feel like that actually is like good enough. If someone understands it, then someone can get into it.
Absolutely, but like, what if the technology becomes available? Because I don't think this is too far away to where like entire like circuits and entire large pieces of hardware, like your entire computer, could be made completely unique by an AI software saying, so this is the way the computers run. This is the way that your computer needs to run. These are the things you want your computer to be able to do. These are the things it needs to be able to control. Now I'm hooked up to like a large, extremely fast, like 3D printer type system that would just be able to build all of the different components of that within like a day. And then it says, okay, so here this is. It's completely unique from anything else that's ever been made in the world. Its software is completely unique. Its hardware is completely unique. Now you can do whatever you want with that. If everybody's stuff was like that, then someone would have to go out of their way to specifically figure out how the AI made your thing, then hack that, and then try and kill you or like do something. But kill you, I guess, is the most harsh extreme example. So in an extreme, if someone's trying to kill you over that, that would be the limit. They could just kill the one person because everybody else's is different. So it'd have to be a very targeted attack. And then once that would happen, or hopefully before that would happen, people could make changes to it so that it never happens again.
Well, the big issue Like there are a lot of big issues. I need to stop saying it like there's like one. There are a lot of issues. Number one, it sounds like your thing that you have, like your like unique thing, would be really hard to like update and like get any new software for or any software for it. Like I have a Chromebook, right? It works on Chrome OS. And I'm not the only person in the world with a Chromebook. But Chromebooks can't run things that are made to run on like Windows computers and like Apple computers. And one thing that really helps with security for like computer and technologies, what the fuck was that sentence? One thing that's really helpful for just technology in general is having like an operating system that's not compatible with whatever the attack is from the like hacker, like offensive like thing in the situation. So if each one had a unique operating system, that would be like super safe. You'd have to learn a whole new operating system in order to hack into like somebody else's thing. But that also means that if you want to play Fortnite and you have your like I got my super unique operating system nobody else has, Fortnite has to like directly accommodate you for you to play Fortnite.
Or it could be set up with specific like links and connectors that it could actually run more widespread OSs or networks without having to compromise its own. Like you would have a specific thing for like, oh, for your gaming software specifically, there's an access port to go into other things. Like it can run on Windows, it can run on Mac, it can run on Chrome OS, it can do all those things, but then it doesn't receive internal things. Like it can't back channel it. Like the information can go out and become changed and encoded, but won't back encode from something like a game. Another way that you can have updates and things like that is the artificial intelligence that's hooked up. Hey guys, sorry. So what ended up happening was my battery ended up dying on the camera. So now we are all back set up, and we have been talking for a minute now, because Jet's been on a live stream, about artificial intelligence and emotional processing units, and how those things are going to sort of shape humanity, and what that means for like different consumer products that are out now that are starting to mess with that. So going back to these other things, you know what sucks about if the emo shape, if it's compromised, or the emo spark, if it's compromised, which is essentially this like network thing that can connect to, it's an artificial intelligence that can connect to all your different devices and stuff, that a company called EmoShape put out and then retracted and is now selling like individual chips, but can't connect to everything. So being that, if it turns a specific shade of red that ends up telling you that it's compromised in some way, what about blind people?
Who would just never see it?
Yeah, they'd just be like, does it tell you like there's a malfunction? Or like if someone messed with the software, it wouldn't tell you because they'd like turn that off.
I mean, I feel like if you compromised it hardware-wise, you could just tell it not to show the red light.
Yeah, but you'd have to like physically compromise it, right? Like,
True, you have to
break
compromise it in both ways. Yeah. Also, real quick, I'd like to read a little bit about the Exolife.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's fucked up about EmoShape when it comes to how they like talk about the Exolife on their website? There's a page that's dedicated to like, here's where you buy it. You can buy it here. Here's where you buy it. And it's like, that's the one they show you. But they have a whole other page that goes into like deeper detail on like a consumer level, like marketing detail about it. And it's not the same page, like, because I know they have another page that tells you about it from like a technical point of view, and I get that. That can be separated from you just buying it, because we imagine that by this point you've already read it if you're going to like buy it.
Right.
But the marketing material that like really sells it, I think should be paired with the page where you buy it. It doesn't make sense to like not connect them.
That makes sense.
But I like to read it because I feel like it'll give everyone involved a better idea of how Exolife works, and maybe give details on how it's a little closer to EmoSpark than we might think.
Absolutely. I just want to say real quick to preface this, my camera only has like 10 minutes of recording left, so this will just shut out at some point, and I'm sorry, but we're going to try and go through as much as we can.
Yeah, understandable. And you guys can always check out nickabenson Nation if you would like to check out some of the other parts that might be missing.
Yeah, catch the full live stream.
So, welcome to the world of ExoLife, the emotion engine that allows your personal assistant, games, avatars, cars, Internet of Things products, and sensors to feel and develop a unique personality. With its sentient capabilities, ExoLife makes your home smart devices emotionally intelligent. By installing ExoLife at home, you will be able to create a small cloud API inside the home that can be utilized by all connected apps or devices. That's the most part. It can do the most part. Listen.
It connects to all your devices.
Yeah, it creates a small cloud API inside the home, it says, but then it says that can be utilized by all connected apps or devices, which makes it sound like, but my phone can go anywhere. Is it going to be like the Wii U gamepad where everyone thought it was a Switch and then you take that bitch outside and it's like, I don't work outside?
Yeah. I think it's going to be a thing where, because it said it can work with all connected apps, so you could have an app that's like the emo shape app. Is that what it's called, the emo shape?
This is the ExoLife.
The ExoLife.
EmoShape is the company. Yeah. ExoLife Connect is what we're talking about, and EmoSpark is the old discontinued thing.
Gotcha. So for the ExoLife, you may have like an ExoLife app that can download on your phone that you just like put in a specific thing and then start sending information from your specific ExoLife to your phone. That just makes it work like that.
I can see it. Let's see. The opportunities are endless, and you can connect almost any device by IP and socket. So, like IP address and like socket name, which is interesting that it says that, because I'm in like my operating systems and networking class for security, like for cybersecurity. And whenever you initiate an attack on like a device, one thing that's very commonly asked for is like the device's address and its socket number. So it was really interesting. But it makes sense. That's just how you connect things most of the time.
Absolutely. So one really interesting idea is that they said this is endless, right? So then, let me do a lowercase e with that so it works a little better. So they say the possibilities are endless with this. But I feel like a lot of people worry with future technology that it's going to like fry your brain. So like if we put right here that it would fry your brain, then all of a sudden you get like a result that seems to come out in the math here.
Friendly. I see where you went.
Spending all of your time on your ExoLife.
Damn.
But then it's your friend.
And it says after the opportunities are endless, and you can connect almost any device by IP and socket, including even your car.
Mm.
So it is like you want Knight Rider?
Yeah. And
that's part of the reason why I want it on the sales page. I feel like that would sell a lot of units to be like Knight Rider.
Yeah. Day Rider.
Afternoon Rider.
Right.
ExoLife is also a must-have for any avid gamer or developer looking to make their games and avatars emotionally intelligent. That one, I think, is oddly phrased. So when it says gamer or developer, it makes it sound like, do you just play games and not develop them? Do you want your game characters to be sentient? Like, they better not be saying that if you plug this into your Xbox, it's like, ooh, now all your characters in Borderlands are sentient. Like, I'd be like, fuck, that's so adaptive. That would be, like, really good and horrible at the same time.
No, I get you. That's definitely, like you were talking about earlier, we brought up the idea, you specifically brought up the idea that there will be a certain point where, like, every non-player character is artificially intelligent and has, like, its own emotions and stuff, which gets into a lot of, like, philosophical debate as far as the morals on that and how it feels for them, like, to die and to go through, like, struggles in the game.
So Papa G just asked, yo, what did I miss? And Papa G's seen like none of the stream. So the big focus of this is MIT's Alter Ego, which is a wearable headset kind of thing. It's more like a jaw set. It's very oddly built. It wraps around the ear and then wraps around your face. But it essentially allows for whenever you vocalize a thought in your mind, so like when you talk to yourself in your head, for that to then communicate to artificial intelligence and devices. Mm-hmm. So you can say like, hey Siri, add milk to shopping list, but you don't say it. You think, hey Siri, add milk to shopping list, and it just does it.
Mm-hmm.
So it essentially allows you to control machines and talk to artificial intelligence and even talk to other people with your mind. And it's a really interesting standpoint in tech. Now what we've been connecting that to is EmoShape Technologies. So EmoShape is a company, I believe it's a British company, it's in London, and it's only 10 people, it's 2 handfuls of people. And what they've done is they've designed the emotional processing unit, which is a chip that can turn any electronic device into a sentient technology that has emotions and has its own thoughts and feelings. And you can ask it questions, and it'll search the internet, and it'll think of its own ideas based off of what it searched. So we've been talking about alter ego technology being used in tandem with EmoShape technologies in order to create really crazy things. For example, we talked about how with alter ego, you can think of a description for an imaginary friend, and it'll turn it into a text string of what you thought of for your imaginary friend. Then there's a Microsoft AI that can take text strings and draw images off of them. So it would draw a sketch of your imaginary friend. Then Selva, Selva 3D is a web browser app that you can go on, and you can upload the image of your imaginary friend to Selva, and it'll create a 3D model. And then from that 3D model, you can load that into something like Unreal or Unity that works with Exolife, and then use Exolife, which is an EmoShape technology, to give your imaginary friend picture, imaginary friend's 3D model, sentience and emotions and thoughts. And because all you had to do was think of what it looked like, and then it created the text, you could give this technology to a very young child, and they do all the things we just described with no effort. And now that child is essentially a god over imaginary friend. But we've gone a long way since then.
I was just going to say, and then also the concept that you could eventually do that with a whole video game, and that connects to being able to make everything in the game sort of sentient, which is even something that EmoShape themselves have done with the
Dream.
Right, Dream. But I want to say, because it seems like my thing is about to run out of recording space, and because I don't want it to just shittily cut out on you guys, I think I'm going to end my recording here. So I just wanted to say thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe if you want to become a citizen of the Empire and get updates on all of the interesting stuff we're up to and all the cool conversations we have with people like Jeff. So again, thank you all for watching. Please make sure to leave some comments, let us know what you thought of it, and I will see you next time.